Hey, greetings. This is Fred in Alaska. Thanks for joining me. Um, there was Today is Saturday, the 4th, I believe. Yesterday morning, an elderly couple heading towards Chitna spotted it was a road crossing approximately a mile before the Thompson Pass cutoff to go to Valdez, and the little cutoff there to go to Kinney Lake down to Chitna. They were about roughly a mile before that little interchange there. And from what was shared, it was approximately 5-ish in the morning. It was light on the horizon, but not, on the roads. But they were coming down the road, this elderly couple, and off to their right, heading south. They thought they saw a big figure and thought it was a moose. So he hit his high beams and he had a big LED bar up on top of his truck, and he lit that up. And this thing was approximately roughly 75 yards in front of them off to the right. And all of a sudden they saw an arm go up like that and a big hand. And then the thing bolted heading towards the direction of the Copper River. Just heads up on that. That was yesterday morning, a little over, 24 hours ago that this couple witnessed that. So what I wanted to share with you today comes from the Nenana River, just north and west of basically Anderson and Clear and all that, right? Right. You got 17 Mile Slough, and then you have the Nenana. I'll put it up on the map. So this comes from George and Penny. Not elders, but, adults. They weren't young kids. Well, this happened 3 years ago. They were coming down the Nenana and they were drifting, and George was fishing. Now, he was just fishing for grayling, trout, whatever was biting. It's the first time he had ever dropped a line in that water, and he was unsure of what really was running in there, or if there was anything, So as he's doing that, this is the wee hours of the morning. It's daylight. It is mid-June, and it's the birds are chirping for a while, and so he hits this little hole and catches a trout, and decides he's gonna go power back up, go up, drop an anchor, and then sit and just fish this hole for a little bit. And Penny didn't care. She was crocheting, doing her thing, doing not crocheting. There's a needle point or something like that. Regardless, she was making doilies and some other stuff. She was focused on what she was doing and letting her husband fish, So, she came prepared to be bored, basically, because, either women love fishing or they'd rather, do other things for sure. But anyway, so as they're fishing, or as he's fishing, he noticed he's casting upriver and he's letting it float down, right? And, he's keeping tension on the line and all that, and he's watching, he's fishing, he's working it. Well, he said it was about the 10th cast, because he always counts his cast, because if, he doesn't have the slightest bit of a nibble within a certain count, he'll move on. It just... So it was about his 10th cast, he said. When he cast it up, he's watching the lure and hoping it doesn't hit the brush and get tangled up, right? He said it barely missed the brush, hit the water, and this thing stepped out from the brush and jumped into the water looking down. And the water was approximately 3 foot deep. He said it came up to maybe just above its knees. It jumped down and it was watching his lure. He said he damn near had a heart attack. He said it looked like a Neanderthal. He said the thing of it is its skin was very weird looking. It was like a mix between like a very dark wood stain and like a caramel color. It was almost like it was two-toned. He said it was really weird, because where you could see it had wrinkles, that was the darker part, and it was lighter in between the wrinkles. So he said it was a real strange looking face. He said the eyes were black. He didn't see any ears. It was looking down in the water at what he had just cast. So he assumes, and again, it's speculation, this thing was watching him, either watching him cast or didn't notice him there and was watching this thing fall in the same spot over and over, and finally you know, caused a reaction and it dropped into the water. And he said he sat there for a second, and then all of a sudden, because he wasn't reeling fast and the way he had his rig set up, the weights just took it down to the bottom of the river there. He said it freaked him out because this thing started reaching into the water, kind of moving around like he was going to grab lure. So he snaps out of it, starts reeling, starts yelling, "Hey, hey, hey, hey," you know. He said as soon as he yelled, the thing looked up at him, kind of like had this look of like, oh, like of disgust, like, oh, one of you kind of thing. He said it got back up on the bank, and at this point, Penny was freaking out because she saw what he saw, and at first, George didn't hear her screaming, right? Because he was so tunnel vision on what was going on with the lure, because it was the damnedest thing you ever seen. I've never heard of them chasing after a lure. But Penny's freaking out, and finally George starts hearing her, which, you know, I'm sure they had a conversation later about that. But so George said when he started reeling in and yelling, and her yelling came into focus, so to speak, this thing had got up on the bank and was behind the brush, moving off to their left. And so he's trying to get his line in, and, you know, he was like, he almost just tossed the rod and started reeling in the anchor. What his concern was, though, is his anchor was dug in above where this thing was. So he had to pull himself over there, because he'd always pull in the line. He wouldn't kick up the kicker and let his wife, you know, pull the line, because you didn't want to risk getting caught in the prop or whatever. So he knew he had to pull himself up and, you know, unset the anchor. And as he was contemplating doing that, this thing is just right over there off to his left, and it's making noises in the brush. When I asked him to elaborate on the noises, he said it sounded like a pig pen. He said he had heard the pigs in a pig pen at some place down south when they were on a vacation. And he said the snorting and the grunts and stuff, it was almost identical. He said it was real weird. So he's listening and trying his best to hurry up and pull. He's telling Penny to fire up the outboard, right? And luckily, it's just a little turnkey, fire it up, right? And so electronic ignition. So as he's pulling the anchor, she fires it up and it's idling. And so once the motor lights up, ignites and, starts running, he said the noises stopped briefly. And so he kept listening, but he's pulling the anchor line. He gets it, he wraps it around the front cleat, and he goes to the stern, powers up a little bit. And what he did was tie that off to the cleat, so when he went forward a little bit, it would disengage the anchor without it going under the boat and wrapping up in the prop, right? So he's doing that. He kills it, or not kills it, but puts it in neutral, runs up front, unties it from the cleat, pulls it in. He said when he dropped the anchor down and looked back over, at this point the boat's starting to drift, you know what I mean? And so it's kind of drifting and turning to face down river. And he said while he's looking in the brush, all of a sudden this rock comes flying, almost hit him, lands behind him in the water. And he was like, screw this noise, you know. He runs back to the thing, to the little, steering station, and he powers up, and he's cutting down river, and he's trying to get the hell out of there. He had planned on getting down to 17 Mile Slough and then cutting back up, right? Because this is, it's just south of Fairbanks, coming down the highway. It's not like, it's remote Alaska, don't get me wrong. You step off the road, you're remote, but there's places nearby. It's not far from civilization, so to speak, right? He said as he was powering up and coming down river, and he's looking around, still trying to figure out what was going on, because Penny's yelling at him, what was that? What was that? And, he had heard Hairy Man stories, but he didn't, it was just like, oh, okay, Hairy Man, well, all right, well, I'll believe it when I see it kind of attitude about it. But he said when he looked over to his right as they were going down river, he saw this thing easily going through the brush. And, of course, the outboard's running, so he, it's pretty loud. He couldn't hear the noises it was making, but he saw it, in between brush, just, and it was keeping up with him. And so finally he backed off, and he didn't know if it was going to like jump out at him or what, you know, because I mean, this poor guy was sitting there fishing, you know, his 10th cast, all of a sudden this thing's jumping in the water after his lure. It was just all too surreal to him. He felt like he was going to have a nervous breakdown because none of it made sense. It was just so, it just hit him, you know, bam, all of a sudden he's dealing with it, right? He's yelling at Penny, it's over here, and he's pointing, and she's just saying, go, go, go. Well, they get down to where 17 Mile Slough meets up with the Nenana, and he knows he has to slow down, cut back, and then go back up, right? He knows he has to, but this thing, last he saw it was still following beside them. And he didn't want to slow down and give it an opportunity to potentially jump on the boat. It was really rough. And the water, from what he said, he felt stupid because he's running close to the bank and he didn't have to. He didn't have to be that close to the bank, but he was so like stuck. Like, whoa, you know, what's happening here, you know, as he's driving the boat. So it dawns on him, well, so he starts, you know, when you're jazzed up on adrenaline, you're not always thinking the clearest. But he had that moment of clarity. He gets away from the bank, and as he slows down, he knows he has to. Otherwise, they could potentially, you know, wipe out or whatever, or just keep going. And he didn't want to do that either. So he slows down, and he said as he slows down, he went further to the other side of the river and then looped back around so he could look at the bank across from him before going up 17 Mile Slough. And he said as he was doing that, he saw it standing over in the brush, just doing this number, just watching him. They cut out of there. He said they ended up going over to Anderson, and you know, he didn't have service there at the moment or whatever, but he went and tracked someone down and used their phone and called one of his buddies. And anyway, so basically what he wanted was his buddy to meet him where he launched his boat and then ride with him to go and check this out. It didn't pan out though, because his buddy's like, screw that, you know, why do you want to go after something like that? So he left that be. And you know, he's gone fishing, just not in the same areas. I want to thank them for reaching out. I'm just glad it didn't kill his, you know, fishing spirit or whatever you want to call it. You know, Penny, she said she has no interest in doing any of those things anymore. She would rather sit at home, and she would rather George did too, but you know, it is what it is. It's a shame, is what it is. When people lose their passion for the outdoors, it's very, very hard to deal with sometimes. Also, another brief encounter from down southeast. There was a couple guys. They were delivering a boat they had sold to somebody, and they were going to basically collect the money, leave the boat, and then get dropped back off, right? They didn't want to say where because it was really close to this person's property where they were selling the boat. But as they were coming up to the guy's property, they saw his existing boat, which was much older and kind of beat up, and he was basically upgrading with the one they were selling this guy. And as they were coming up, they saw someone, well, they thought it was this guy that was going to buy the boat, walking down the beach. So they start going down the beach, waving, hey, we're here. And then all of a sudden it dawns on them how big this thing was. They said it was real skinny looking. It looked like it had on initially from the distance when they were coming up on this guy's property, the way it was walking, it almost looked like it had on rain gear, you know, and it had been raining earlier in the morning, so it wasn't far-fetched for someone to be in rain gear because it was real dark. And so as they got closer and realized, oh, that's not a person, this thing turns, looks at them, and takes off running down the beach and then cuts up into the brush and stuff, right? So they circle around, they're looking, and, you know, initially they were worried about going over to this property to sell the boat. You know, like, what the hell was that? Because it wasn't adding up at first. So they said when they got over to the property, and at that point the guy was coming down to the beach, he's waving, hey, you know, how's it going, or whatever. And they started yelling, hey, there was something over there going down the beach. They said this guy nonchalantly said, that's just a Bigfoot. And they were just like, what? Yeah, you know, they were in shock. He was just so nonchalant about it. And according to what they said, this guy was like, it's here in the spring, it's here in the fall. It doesn't bother anything. Every once in a while it's looked in the window, but we've had no problems with it. We just leave it alone, you know. And he asked, please don't take pot shots at it if it's on the beach. I don't want it coming back to my house. But according to what they said, this guy that ended up buying the boat from him was just, it is what it is kind of attitude about it. Yeah, they said he was older, you know, mid-60s-ish, and was just like, yeah, that's what it is. And I guess, you know, from small talk or whatever, on when the guy was, you know, basically taxiing them back to where they needed to go, he told them, yeah, you know, for the last 20-something years that they had been there, every spring and every fall, they would have these sightings of this creature. And it was never aggressive, according to what he said. It was always more curious, always watching them when they were doing stuff down at the beach, whether it be loading the boat, unloading the boat. They never gave it anything to eat. They never did any of that kind of stuff. It was just spring and fall. This thing was seen on the beach, peeked in the house once or twice, and was always, they were never in fear. It was always a curiosity thing. It was always a very, very different vibe. You know what I mean? And I want to thank them for reaching out and sharing that. It was just a brief thing, but it wouldn't have made a whole video. So I'm just, you know, I'm trying to catch up on some of the older ones that I haven't had a chance to share yet, just because, you know, I'm trying to stay on top of it, and, you know, I'm still running behind, but that's whatever. Also have some telephonic interviews coming up real soon with some witnesses. We're going to talk to Mike again from the village, and there's some other things happening. I don't want to get ahead of myself, because it seems like anytime I plan stuff and plan an interview, something falls through, and so I'm sitting here holding the bag. But I want to thank you guys for joining me. Let's see, what else is there? We got things coming up on Monday and Tuesday. Monday, I'm doing a podcast with Chattermarks, which is a podcast for the Anchorage History Museum. And then Tuesday, I'll be with Jerry Williams and those guys. Lead Tracker E. I got the stuff. I'll make sure it's pinned before, you know, that comes up, so you guys can join us if you want. What else was there? That was it offhand. Hey, I want to thank you guys for joining me. All the people who subscribed, I appreciate it. Appreciate the support of the channel, for everyone who's been here. And excursions are coming very soon. The leaves are starting to bud. It's a little partly to mostly shitty out right now, but you know, it's Alaska. It is what it is. But luckily we got rain gear for that stuff. Anyway, thanks for joining me, and we'll catch you on the next one.